discussing facts. We have patriots of Syria here with us, and I think it would be the right thing to do to give the floor to the small boy here, Hassan Diab. He's only 11 years old. You can see him on the white helmet's footage. He's an alleged victim of the chemical attack. But first we would like to ask his father, Amar Diab, to say a couple of words. And after that, if Hassan wants to say a few words, he will be given an opportunity to do so. Good evening. My name is Amar Hassan. I'm the father of this little boy you can see here. I'd like to speak about the truth of what happened. My children heard the screams that they needed to go to the hospital, so they went to the hospital. They saw fires in the streets. They saw smoke. So they came to the hospital through the tunnels near our house. In the hospital, some people took my children and brought them to the ambulance, and they started pouring water on them, cold water. Now, because of that, they have suffered, and my wife explained that these children were brought to this hospital without asking their parents. Later we found out that this was a fake. We saw absolutely no evidence of chemical weapons, and all of my family members are feeling well. We were in the basement and we heard people shouting that we needed to go to the hospital. So when we were in the hospital, we went there through the tunnels. At the hospital, they started pouring water on me, cold water. Thank you.
Спасибо, маленький Хасан, за твой рассказ. Давайте продолжим разговор.
Let's continue our conversation. The next participant of our talk today, Khalil al-Jaish, Dr. Khalil al-Jaish. He's an expert in resuscitation. Good evening. We came here to inform the world on what happened in Douma, because what happened goes against what was shown in the media and spread through the media. Because the video you have seen shows the hospital, the emergency rescue department, and I have been there. I have seen what happened, and what happened had been shown on this video, because on the 7th of April I have been in the hospital. About 7 p.m. we had people coming in suffering from asphyxiation, but the fact is it was because of smoke. So they had difficulty breathing because of smoke intoxication. And the reason it happened was because nearby building has been bombed, and there was smoke and dust that came inside into the hospital, into the buildings, and in the shelter where people were hiding, people unfortunately inhaled all this dust and smoke, and this is why they had difficulty breathing. So the symptoms of asphyxiation were relatively mild, moderate, and we did everything that we were supposed to do. We gave them oxygen masks. We proceeded as we always do in such cases. We gave them hydrocortisone. Then a person came, one of the white helmets, and he started shouting that there was a chemical attack, that chemical weapons have been used. And after that, at the emergency care, we saw people creating this hysteria, this chaos in the hospital. They started dousing people with water. We didn't believe these people because we saw no symptoms of chemical attack, of chemical intoxication. So there were no evidence of chemical weapons use. All these things, all the people who had suffered from asphyxiation came home later that day. There were no deaths, no people died during that day. And this is the only emergency care in all of Douma. Now we're waiting for the next commentary by Abdurrahman Hijazi, another resident of Douma.
Good evening. My name is Abdurrahman Hijazi. I'm a resident of Douma. I'm a freelancer. I do not work at the hospital. I'm just an ordinary citizen. I came to the hospital that day because I had this small problem, and about 6 p.m. I saw people coming into the hospital, claiming that they were from the civil protection. They started claiming that they had people with them that had suffered from chemical weapons. As a person who was actually inside there, I could see that these people were okay. I didn't feel any kinds of smells, or I didn't see any kinds of evidence for chemical weapons. But what they did, they create this atmosphere of chaos. They shouted, they screamed. But I can say for certain that nothing bad happened there.
I didn't feel any chemical weapons. I didn't see any people beside me, any other people affected by chemical weapons. So several hours later, I came back home from the hospital. My house is about 1 kilometer away from the hospital, so I went on foot. I felt okay, and after I came home, I didn't feel any symptoms or anything that would indicate any chemical exposure. Now, as for this water dowsing performed by white helmets, what they did was they were just getting them clean because of all the dust and smoke after the explosions. So there were no evidence of chemical attack in Douma. Thank you.
Спасибо большое. Следующий у нас для выступления лаборант больницы Саида Дас.
At the lab in the hospital. Next we'll hear Said Das, who works at the lab in the hospital. Good evening. My name is Said Das. I work at the laboratory at Douma Hospital. I perform blood analysis and I collect blood from the patients. So this is a lab that works both for the hospital and the whole and for the emergency care. Now, it all started on Friday. There were a lot of people. There are a lot of people who suffered because of the bombings, the airstrikes. We worked at the hospital on Saturday as well, and at that day, on the 7th of April, I was at my lab. I was collecting blood, and I was transferring it to the emergency care. Now, I was in my lab when I heard that some people in the emergency care were screaming about chemical weapons. Now, after taking the remaining blood capsules with the blood from the donors, I ran to see what's happening. I came there to find that the floor has been completely doused with water. It was very chaotic. I could smell dust and smoke. But this was a result of an airstrike that happened some time before that in the streets. So smoke just came into the hospital from the streets. I asked the doctors there what has been happening. Now, they said that it was nothing out of the ordinary, it's just people were scared. They said that this chaos started there because the people from the shelter upstairs started coming down into the hospital. Also, there were people there outside the hospital who wanted to get into the shelter. And so many of these people were also shouting about chemical weapons. So these people who were inside the hospital, they were dousing these alleged victims with water. And so we were there inside. We saw everything. We didn't put on any masks. We didn't hear any smell of chemical weapons, because
If this had been chemical weapons, we would suffer some of the effects. We would feel something, but we felt nothing. Thank you. So the next on the list is Muvafak Nasrin. He's a male nurse. Good evening. I am a paramedic officer at the Douma hospital. I was in the hospital on the 6th and 7th of April, and on the 8th of April as well. I was at the emergency care on Saturday, on the 7th of April. We were receiving people who suffered from the airstrikes. There were all kinds of there were people coming at about 7 p.m. with symptoms of smoke and dust intoxication with asphyxiation. So these were cases of asphyxiation. So these people came down from the shelter. So we did all we could to stabilize their situation. So as you could see on the video, there were people coming in, screaming, shouting about chemical weapons. And as a result of their shouting, people started to feel fear. They were frightened. And so there was this atmosphere of chaos, of anarchy. And one person brought a small girl, a young girl, into the hospital. We checked her, we looked at her, but we found no evidence of chemical weapons. There were no chemical weapons used on her. We didn't find any symptoms or any evidence. I was in the hospital on the 8th of April, and there was nothing that could show that there had actually been a chemical incident. Now I'd like to give the floor to the person who did not participate in this fake video by white helmets. His name is Yasir Abdelmajid. He was in a different place at the hospital, and he could see everything. Good evening. My name is Yasir Abdelmajid. I'm a surgeon at the hospital at Douma. On the 7th of April, on that day, I was in the hospital starting from 7:30 in the morning. I was at the surgical department. During the day, we had people coming in with all kinds of wounds that were due to the hostilities that had taken place during the day and the shelling. At about 7 or 7:15 p.m., there was a person who came to the surgical area with a girl who was just about 1.5 or 2 years old. It was said that she was brought there by an ambulance and they needed to consult a surgeon. It was also said that this girl has suffered because of a chemical material. And when
we saw her, her body temperature was lowered, she was wet with water, and her stomach was swelled. So I examined her, and from my point of view, from the point of view of a surgeon, she was healthy. But I was surprised that they said that she suffered a chemical attack. I examined her more broadly, and I was sure that there was nothing of that sort. I asked her if she really felt that there was some kind of a chemical used on her. After examining her, I couldn't find any evidence, any symptoms showing that she had suffered because of some chemicals. Her general health was good. There were no symptoms showing any chemical evidence, chemical weapons exposure. So I helped her to dry her clothes, and I gave her a blanket, covered her with a blanket, and once I saw that she was okay, that her general health was good, that she hadn't suffered any kinds of wounds, I gave her back to the ambulance. And for the rest of the day, for the rest of my shift, I stayed in the hospital performing surgeries to the people coming into the hospital. But as I've said, this girl, it was said that she suffered a chemicals attack. And after my examination, I didn't see any evidence, anything that would indicate that she has been exposed to a chemical weapon. Thank you. So, we still have some people who would like to talk. Now I'd like to give the floor to Ahmad Khashoy, who has been working at the hospital, at the emergency care. His name is Ahmad Khashoy. You have the floor.
He went outside. Mumtaz Al-Hanash, medical surgeon.
Вот мне подсказывают, что Ахмад Хашой
has just left the audience for a couple of minutes. And I would like to give the floor to Mumtaz Al-Hamash, who's a paramedic.
Assalamu alaikum. Greetings to everyone. My name is Mumtaz Khanash. I am with the surgical department. On the day of the incident, I was working on my blog. I would like to draw your attention to a few important issues. The first thing is that working as a medic in that hospital was a challenge because we were short on staff. And for those few days, from the 6th to 8th of April, a humanitarian corridor was open, and a large number of doctors, medics went through it. So they chose to left, and we were short on staff. We worked round the clock for 3 days in a row. And working like that, as well as the high numbers of people who turned in for help, led to the fact that we could not give people the high-quality service we wanted to. We had help from people who did not have proper medical training or experience. and many of them are on the video. You can see them working haphazardly, not the way professionals should work, medical professionals. And when there was that person who claimed that chemical weapons had been used, causing panic in the emergency department, that's what happened, and people reacted to that. They started to apply medical measures the way they thought was okay, without consulting the proper medics. Although our hospital does have a special department for such cases, and there were some people in the emergency room too at the time. We were operating on them. I like to say that some people came into this surgical room. They went in from the next building. They had some difficulties breathing. They were coughing a lot. But after the medical exam, we did not see any symptoms that would indicate of them suffering from a chemical weapons attack. That was caused by inhaling much dust. Thank you very much. Thank you. I give the floor to Ahmad Al-Saur, paramedic from the emergency department of the Syrian Red Half Moon. Good evening. My name is Ahmad Saur. I am with the Red Crescent in Syria. Our emergency department was taking in emergency patients. That's what we do. We provide the first medical aid. The Red Cross is not working temporarily, and from 6th through 8th of April, it was the same. That was due to the ongoing military operation. I was working at the time, and our department was checking in patients. On those days, from 6th to 8th of April, we did not register any cases of chemical poisoning. All the people who checked in at the time, they either checked in for medical help, getting drugs, or with the injuries, such as injuries from debris, by debris. And none of those patients showed any signs of chemical poisoning. Thank you. Thank you very much. I can see that Mr. Ahmad Kashoy, administrator with the emergency department, is back with us. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Ahmad Kashoy. I'm responsible for the logical operations in the hospital of Douma. I'd like to tell you what happened on the 7th of April in the hospital of Douma. At the time, I have been living at the hospital for about half a month. At 7 p.m., I was near the entrance to the hospital. I saw a person come in with a child. He started screaming about chemical weapons. Throughout the day, we have been seeing people coming in, checking in with all kinds of wounds because of the shelling, because of the airstrikes. Now, this person came in, started shouting, created chaos. In the emergency care, there were a lot of people who were frightened. They were panicked. And frankly speaking, there were people who had problems breathing, but we have seen people like that coming in throughout the day. And we saw that this shouting about chemical weapons was used to instigate panic. The hospital in Douma is a very large building. It's enforced, and at the lower floors there are many families who live there, using it as a shelter. These people fled they fled the hostilities taking place in the city. And once they heard screams about chemical weapons, they were even more frightened. This panic spread, and there were about 1,000 or maybe 1,500 people there at the time. There were people unknown to us that were filming the emergency care. They were filming the chaos taking place inside. And they were filming people being doused with water. The instruments they used to douse them with water were originally used to clean the floors, actually. All this has been happening for about an hour. After that, we provided care to these people and sent them home. There were no mortalities, no one has died. All the people who came, among them there were no people suffering from any chemical exposure. Thank you. And our final guest from Syria today is Dr. Hassan Oyun.
Doctor.
He's a medical doctor.
السلام عليكم. شكرا جزيلا على الاستضافة.
Good evening.
اسمي حسان عيون.
Thank you for your hospitality. My name is Hassan Ayoun. I am a doctor with the emergency department. I was on duty on 6th through 8th of April. And I've been working with the emergency department since 2013. I started my career in Damascus. And what Dr. Montaz already said is that a lot of medical professionals left our hospital during those days because of the humanitarian operation. So we were forced to work in challenging conditions because we had to use help of unprofessionals, people who were not properly trained. For many years, people in Douma have been using car tires used to cut and to burn them for fires. So I was working on 6th through 8th of April. My duty was, I was to be relieved from my duty on the 8th, but there was no replacement, so I continued working. We began to getting in patients checking in, the injured and the wounded from the military action. And that continued like that for the next day. We had from 15 to 20 people with some difficulties breathing. We gave them a check and we did not see any indications, any obvious indications of any kind of weapons. Their pupils were normal. There were no signs or indications in their bodies, in their ribs, so they were all suffering light or medium inconveniences. We gave them all the help we could, and they left the hospital in a few hours. We did not leave any of those patients for further, we did not check them in to stay with the hospital for further care. There were no complications with any patients on that day. That's what I wanted to say, and thank you very much. That's what I would like to add to the whole discussions. So, thus, today, the states participants to the Convention prohibiting chemical weapons and the active member of the Council of the organization, the observer state. And now, as we speak to the international community through this press conference, we are delivering evidence and testimonies indicating that what happened on Douma, in Douma Hospital on 7th of April was a provocation by the white helmets. So all those people feeding off the taxpayers, especially in the first place the United States and Great Britain.
All right, we'll dip out of that now. You've been watching for more than the last hour here on RT International. Russia's defense ministry giving a presentation on the alleged chemical attack in the Syrian city of Douma on the 7th of April to the Opcw in The Hague. The Russian representative to the UN's chemical weapons watchdog speaking, the doctors on the scene that day, crucially, Russia's head of chemical defense forces, and again, crucially and poignantly, a father and son caught up in it all with the same message. They say a chemical attack didn't happen, and that video that was so widely circulated in the hospital purporting to show something like that having happened, they say is false, a false flag. Our Europe correspondent, Peter Oliver, has been listening into all of that for the last hour or so. A lot to get through, a lot of witnesses put forward with a lot of detail, Pete, all with the same message, though. What stood out for you?
A lot of details, but one very clear message running through it. And I think it was hammered home by Alexander Shulgin, who's Russia's permanent representative to the Opcw, the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons, saying that they believe that the attack in Douma was a provocation. He went on to accuse France, the UK, the United States of tugging at heartstrings by showing child victims as they were portrayed in the media, saying that the evidence that Russia has and which they've put forward to the Opcw shows that this was, and I quote, sloppily staged. We also heard from the Syrian representative to the Opcw, who said that Syria had destroyed all of their chemical weapons back in 2013. He also refuted these claims that there was any type of chemical attack that took place. And then we heard from the Russian military representative who spoke there, Igor Kirillov. He said that if you look at the video, if you look at the actual canister, that in the video that's supposed to show the delivery mechanism of this attack, that logistically it would be impossible to deliver a chemical weapon in such a way. We have to remember that we are led to believe that on the 7th of April that as many as 70 people were killed after a chlorine and sarin mix were used in a chemical attack on this town. But then what we did hear from, we heard from some of those people that were in those videos that had been circulated widely. We heard from Hassan Diab, who's an 11-year-old boy who's filmed in those videos being doused with water afterwards. He said that we were told that we should go to hospital, and we went through the tunnels to the hospital, and we were told we'd been the victim of a chemical attack. His father said exactly the same thing there. We did also hear from doctors who were present in the hospital at the time. They said that they treated people who had symptoms of asphyxiation. They treated people who had suffered from smoke inhalation. They did not say that they treated anybody who had suffered from well, what you would imagine being the repercussions from a chemical attack. There was, they pointed out that there was no smell, that there was no physical presence of a chemical agent on the bodies, things that you would expect if there had been a chemical attack. We heard from one surgeon who was there on the ground saying exactly this thing. So we have heard from a number of witnesses that have been brought forward by the Russian side and by the Syrian side saying that this wasn't a chemical attack. The Russian side, as I said, going as far as saying that this was sloppily staged and designed to look like a chemical attack. Certainly incendiary words. We're going to have to wait and see what reaction comes from this, but as it stands, the Russian stance and the Syrian stance on this remains the same, that there was no chemical attack in Douma and that this was some kind of provocation.
Yeah, indeed. Peter Oliver, our Europe correspondent, watching on there. So it went on for more than an hour. A lot of detail, a lot of witnesses put forward, as you say, all with the same message. Now, one of the witnesses of that incident in Douma we heard from was the 11-year-old boy Hassan Diab. He was filmed in a hospital in Douma being treated for what was allegedly a chemical attack and symptoms of it. Here's his story.
We were outside and they told all of us to go into the hospital. I was immediately taken upstairs and they started pouring water on me.
Do you remember where it happened?
Here with the hose.
Where is it?
Here it is. They poured water on me. They put me here and then took me upstairs to my mother. That's me in the video, that's me. Yes.